Welcome to session 78 of Brain Software with Mike Mandel, and I'm Chris Thompson. The hypnotic storm is raging worldwide and bringing immense quantities of snow to the Toronto area. Here he is, ladies and gentlemen, the man who's going out to shovel his driveway yet again. He's got blood in his eye, Christmas music on his iPod, and is already sick of winter. Please welcome to the trauma room of the very center of the hypnotic rash ER, Mike Mandel.
Good one, Chris. Yes, back again. Welcome to the testicle ward of the rash of the hypnotic. Yeah, it's so many ways you can go with this. That was brilliant. The trauma room.
You just said nice. Testicle on a podcast.
I know, the testicle ward.
That's hilarious.
It's the testicle ward of a casualty hospital. Implication, the entire hospital is for accidents at casualty hospital in Britain, and one entire ward is just for testicular injuries. It's the kind of thing we talk about because it's hypnotic.
Yeah. Okay.
I promise I'm not going to do any guinea pig laughs in this one, but I just want, before we get into this material, I want you to do one because you do a really funny one. Yeah, there's something weird about you.
There's something not quite right. I need to practice it more. That was
okay.
That was just from our friend Mark in Houston.
Nice. Now, Chris, maybe you want to explain doing this one remotely again.
Yeah, we're doing this one. Well, so it's wintry weather extraordinaire here in Ontario. We've just had a lot of snow dumped on us.
It's a hypnotic snowstorm now.
Yeah, so Mike is not driving out to my place as per usual to record these podcasts.
Even though I have winter tires.
We are on Skype. But you know what? Even with winter tires, it's just safer to stay off the roads when there's this much snow.
I'm not kidding. I was telling one of our friends, Stephen Watts, down in Louisiana, he's got no snow, of course, but I was telling him there were 500 car crashes, fender benders, but car crashes in Toronto yesterday because of the weather change. I mean, it's crazy. So, yeah, I've got blood in my eye because I burst a blood vessel in my eye. I didn't know what it was at first and just immediately thought it was eye cancer or something, but saw my eye doctor yesterday and she said all is good. I do have Christmas music on the iPod, and I'm blasting it with alarming frequency. We have 2 Christmas trees set up in our house, twice as many as needed, and yes, I'm sick of winter. But, bro, here's the weird thing. It's not even winter yet. It's still, as of our recording,
technically it's fall.
Yeah, we've got 5 days to go of fall still. This does not indicate a good sign.
No, but
no, it's not a good indication.
I want to bring this up really quickly before we'll mention a couple of things, then we'll dive into the great content that we have, which is all about the immense power of language, everybody, coming up. Great podcast. But my wife and I have been in the habit for a couple of years now of going out a couple of times a week and doing 5-kilometer walks. And it doesn't matter if it's the middle of summer when obviously it's T-shirt and shorts weather, or if it's the middle of winter, like it feels like the middle of winter, despite the fact that, as you just said, it is technically still fall. It was minus 13 degrees Celsius this morning. So long as you dress appropriately, which in my case is sweatpants, a pair of warm pants over top of that, like a plasticky layered pant.
Right. That's good, Ken.
A very warm winter coat, a hat. What do you call those things that look like a robber's mask? Balaclava?
Sorry, Chris, just dozing off there. What was that? Yes, a balaclava, yes.
I wore one of those, and anyway,
I saw the picture of you on our Facebook group.
Yeah.
You look like a psycho killer. It was hilarious. With the glasses and the hood, and Dexter again.
Point being, you can enjoy any weather provided you dress appropriately for it, and it was a nice day. We got outside, we got our exercise, felt wonderful, and now we're recording this podcast. In the warmth of my home again. So, all right. Now let's do it. Let's do a very quick mention of a couple of things that are coming up in Toronto in terms of live training, and then we'll dive into some awesome content. So I want to make sure that all of you know we have now opened registration for the May 2017 Architecture of Hypnosis. The dates are May 8th through 12th. Probably about half the spots at this point are gone.
Are you serious, Chris? I'm not kidding with that question. Are you serious?
Yes.
I thought we may have 1 or 2. That's amazing.
No. Yeah, absolutely. We've got probably
about a dozen?
More than 10, yeah.
Wow.
Already gone. So by the time you're listening to this, folks, I just think that because it's around Christmas, people are slower to take action. So it's probably not super critical that if you're wanting to sign up, you go do it right away. But I wouldn't hesitate too long. MikeMandelHypnosis.com/class gives you all the details. May 8th through 12th is the next class that we're doing in terms of the 5-day architecture of hypnosis. But What's cool is some people who are coming in from out of town are coming in early because on your birthday, Mike, we begin April 29th and 30th.
We do.
A 2-day class with our friend Carl Smith, who's coming in from the UK, and he's teaching the kinetic shift.
What a
technique.
Class that's going to be, Chris. And that is selling like hotcakes, to use the metaphor, all of a sudden. And Carl is a phenomenal teacher. We have seen him train in Las Vegas. He's a good friend, and we're going to have an absolute blast with this weekend-long training in Toronto at the World Hypnotic Epicenter, Brennan Hall, St. Michael's College, University of Toronto. Spend 2 days with Carl, and Chris and I are there as students like you guys.
Absolutely.
We want to learn from this amazing trainer.
This is going to be a fun one because, like you just said, Mike, you and I are both taking Carl's class. And for those of you who are interested in a very direct style of hypnosis that focuses on fears and anxieties and traumas, Carl's technique is incredible, the kinetic shift. Go to MikeMandelHypnosis.com/Carl, and that's Karl. And you can get all the details. Now, I should also mention that he is being hosted, I believe it's the weekend before, so that would make it April 22nd and 23rd. For those of you on the West Coast, closer to California, our friends Scott Sandlin and Richard Clark are hosting Carl in California at their school as well. So there's two opportunities to see Carl, and all of the details are on our page at MikeMandelHypnosis.com/Carl, Karl. All right, on with today's content. Mike, what are we talking about?
Right. Well, our show theme today, our snow theme today, is the immense power, nice laugh, immense power of language. I mean, we, as hypnotists, Chris, as NLP trainers, practitioners, as agents of change and unconscious coaches and whatever you want to call us, words are our weapons. They're also our tools. They're also our bridge builders. The power of language. And that is why some of you find it funny that I'm such a stickler for precision in language. But words mean things. And if we wish to be precise, as Marilyn Vosavant said in her book Brain Building, we need to use a lot of the what's the word I'm looking for, Chris?
Well, I'm not really quite sure, Mike.
Oh, I think it's variety.
Well, let's edit that out.
We'll edit that out. We need to have access to the variety of the shades of meaning that are available to us in the English language, in which we can say more things in more ways than in any other language. And I think hypnotists and agents of change, therapists who neglect to build their schema, neglect to develop these power language techniques, are shortchanging themselves. And we know, Chris, from previous podcasts, the very aspect of something as simple as telling someone to try to do something instead of telling them to do it
implies failure.
Right. If at first you don't succeed, try again, and fail, and try, and fail, and try. In fact, I've joked for years that I have seen in so many films, you'll see there'll be a hostage taking, or a woman is pregnant waiting to deliver a child and there's complications. There's some crisis moment that is building suspense in a film or TV show, and someone, usually a police negotiator or whatever, is going to say these words to the family that's under stress or the person waiting behind the scenes. They'll say,
"Try to calm down," or something like that.
Try to get some sleep.
Yeah. Right.
Try to get some sleep. And you know full well as a viewer that the person's going to be awake all night. Well, I've joked about this for years, and last night Heather and I were watching an episode of Downton Abbey on DVD, and they actually said, try to get some rest. And I went, there it is. And she's like, what? But we have to recognize our words are having an effect. And as hypnotists, we have three immense models that are available to us that we can use for influential communication, that we can use to make our language interesting and well fleshed out, and we can change people's states through the judicious use of language.
Okay, so three models. Now we're getting into some interesting stuff. So what are these three models that you want to talk about?
Okay, so first of all, the power language that I mentioned isn't really a model. It's just saying there's certain words that will have certain effects, like try will imply failure. Why is not a powerful word to use when you want to move forward, because it tends to keep you stuck in the present state instead of moving to the target state. Can't is another one we mentioned in previous podcasts, that it appears to be the case that if and when we say we cannot do something or can't do something, our brain shuts down the very resources we require for that task a lot of the time. So power language is sort of little snippets like this, but it's not a sort of deeply formulated way of looking at the world. But one of the things that we use as hypnotists is the Milton model. And I know this is something that you're well familiar with as a hypnotist. Do you want to describe what it is?
Of course, any hypnotist worth their salt should understand the Milton model. And so just to back up one step, there are several different models of hypnosis, but two of the common ones that people will talk about are the direct model and the indirect model. So the direct model, of course, being, you are getting sleepy, your eyes are getting tired, that's right, you're falling into a trance, whatever it is. And then we have the Milton model approach, the very indirect approach, where we would just talk to people about how they could begin to notice certain things are starting to happen. And what's a certain thing? It's different for everybody, right? So it's vague. It's artful, vague language. So you can begin to notice that growing sense of ease developing as you continue to listen to all of the things that are happening in your own mind and outside.
Don't listen to this podcast.
Whatever it is, yeah. So we're saying stuff that is so vague that people have to go inside and form their own internal definition of whatever
they have to attach meaning to it based on their own schema, their own personal history, and so on. You're absolutely right. And you brought up an interesting distinction here, Chris, without intending to, I think, but it's a very good one. When you were talking about the directive hypnosis, you're getting sleepy, you're getting tired, you're falling into a trance. The Peter Ravine stuff I used to laugh about. He was a really interesting guy.
You're falling into a trance.
Yeah, that's a good impersonation for someone who never saw him.
I've heard you do the impersonation.
I met him only once, and he used to mispronounce things. And ladies and gentlemen, as you fall into
gentlemen.
I mean, really bizarre pronunciation.
Did he actually say gentlemen?
Ladies and gentlemen, with the aid of a lady or a gentleman, I will conduct a seance and summon a poltergeist. I mean, really odd stuff. It was hilarious and brilliant, though. So I'm not taking a shot at Ravine, so I don't people writing in and think I am. You'll know when I'm taking a shot at someone, I will tell you. Mm-hmm. But the thing you said, Chris, was about the direct hypnosis. But even that can be split into two again, subdivided, because we will get the hypnotists who say things like, your eyes are closing, you're getting sleepy, your eyes are getting tired. And that is suggestive hypnosis, right? That's suggestive and direct.
As opposed to directive.
Right.
Close your eyes.
Right, which is what we prefer to say. Allow your eyes to close. Mm-hmm. Sink into that chair. Permit yourself to begin to get tired. We're putting the onus of it on the subject rather than suggesting that it's happening, so they're not sitting there going, not working, not working, not working, not working. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so...
You know what I'm saying?
I do. No, I'm saying... So if we think about the Milton model... outside of the context of formal hypnosis, we do have a lot of listeners who are not hypnotists. They're curious about all of this stuff. So where would you say that the Milton model is useful in everyday life, just in terms of having a conversation where somebody's going through a problem or there's a conflict that needs to be resolved or whatever?
Well, let's back it up first by defining our terms a little more succinctly so it'll make it easier for those who find this to be a new concept. Let's look at the meta model first.
Okay, good. That way,
and then we'll look at the Milton model as the obverse side of the coin. So the Milton model, the meta model, right? Here we go again. The meta model was written by John Grinder, the linguist, and one of my teachers. John Grinder and Richard Bandler in their book, The Structure of Magic. They actually volumes 1 and volume 2. And what they did was, Grinder, being a linguist, was superb at this. They took the language patterns of at least 3 therapists, Virginia Satir, family therapist, Milton Erickson, hypnotherapist, Fritz Perls, Gestalt therapist, and they basically looked at how these people were getting amazing results. And they began to model the language itself. And the meta model came out of that. And the idea is the meta model is very easy to understand if you recognize that it goes for great specificity, and all you are doing is using language to clarify language. So if you say something like, oh, he makes me mad all the time, there's many ways of using the meta model there. You can say all the time, every single time, which is challenging the generalization. Or you might say, who specifically makes you mad all the time? Identifying the source of this. Or you might say, in what way or how specifically does he make you mad? And it causes the person to get in touch with their deep structure, which is where the language is functioning unconsciously, and begin to enrich their map of the world. And so the meta model uses language to get greater and greater specificity. So that's the first one we have here.
And it's very important in terms of communicating with somebody. If you ask meta model questions, not only do you force the other person to go inside and form a richer model, but they're communicating it with you. So you actually understand what they mean by, say something like, oh, that hurts. You know, if a child hurts themselves, they say, ow. Well, you don't really know what do they mean specifically.
Exactly.
Did they break their arm, or did they get a mosquito bite?
And the meta model, you're right, the meta model gives us precision tools to begin to evaluate very, very carefully what they're saying and unpack and unravel what they're saying into a more detailed and a richer map of their world. Now, having said all that, the classic meta model question, of course, is the magic question, what do you want? Because typically people come in complaining and moaning, and we've said many times that, you know, people always want to give you what they don't want. And we say, you know, you don't want to be a tin miner on Jupiter. You don't want to drive needles into your eyes. The list of what you don't want is infinite. And I love the way Jamie Smart put it. He said, you don't go to a grocery store with a list of all the items you aren't planning on buying. And it's really a clever line.
List. You don't need avocados today. You don't need bananas. You don't need coconut milk.
Isn't that brilliant?
Yeah.
So instead, we ask the meta model question, what do you want? Well, I don't want to have a headache every day. So what do you want instead of that? Well, I want to feel better. And okay, so what does feel better feel like to you? What does that specifically mean? Feel better how? You know, so the meta model begins to go brighter and brighter, illuminating what they are giving you into greater and greater specificity. And it's really good because you can use it in negotiation, you can use it in conversation, and it's a very powerful tool. So again, you're taking what they're saying and you're breaking it down into the components to get a greater level of understanding there.
Right. This is such a common one. My daughter, for example, might come home from school and tell us that, you know, she's really mad at her teacher. Well, mad specifically how, what happened. You need to get detail, right? You can't just assume that you're mad at the teacher. Well, she must have mistreated you in some way, or whatever it is.
Right.
Just, if you don't ask meta model questions, then you end up making assumptions, right?
And we say, when you assume, you make an ass out of you and me.
You got it.
Yeah. So now realize the meta model is based on the fact that all human beings do three things when they communicate. They generalize, they delete, and they distort. Right. So we make generalizations to make life easier. We know that if we turn a steering wheel on a car, regardless of what model car it is, regardless of the size or color of the steering wheel, it will steer the car.
Yeah, if you tell me, hey, turn left here, I know what you mean, and I can generally understand.
Right. You make generalizations that all doorknobs let you through doors, regardless of what the doorknobs look like. So you don't have to see one that's a lever doorknob instead of a circle and go, okay, this is kind of weird. I wonder if I should take the hinges off the door with a screwdriver. No. You apply the generalization. So we have generalizations the first. The second one is deletion. We are continuously deleting things from our conscious awareness. It's how we make sense of the world. And otherwise, we would be overwhelmed with too much stuff in our magic number 7 plus or minus 2 chunks of information. If I say to you, Chris, go to the store and get a liter of milk, you know that I mean, okay, it's freezing out. You want to find somewhere that's pretty close. You better take money with you to pay for the milk when you get there. There's a whole bunch of stuff that is implied in that I don't have to spell out each time. I don't have to say, put your shoes on because there's snow on the ground. Go outside, shut the door behind you, get in the car, start it with the key that you brought with you. All of that is deleted from the communication as unnecessary because it is assumed, right?
Absolutely.
So then we move into, we've had generalization, we have deletion, we have distortion. Distortion is how we twist things and move them around in our heads. It's a useful skill. It helps us hallucinate things that aren't there, imagine things that are new. An engineer who wants to build a bridge over a chasm has to look at it and hallucinate a bridge being there. He's got to imagine it, which is a distortion of reality to make things happen. So in all of these cases, generalization, deletion, and distortion, the meta model gets to breaking them down so we begin to get specificity and understanding of the other person's model of the world. Now, having said all that, the Milton model is the exact opposite. The Milton model generalizes all over the place. It causes tons of deletion and distortion on purpose. And one of the things we'll see is something like mind reading. Mind reading is when we think we know what someone else is thinking, but we don't unless we ask them or they tell us outright. So a meta-model violation would be, you think that I'm no good, which is my wife's family, the sort of thing they say all the time. They have argumentation, discussion by telling you what you're thinking. That's how they talk. You think this, you think that, you mean this. Well, if I thought that, which I don't, I wouldn't need them to tell me because I'm already inside my head. It's ludicrous. So we can't read people's minds. That's a meta-model violation. So I'd say, how specifically do you know that? Right? Now, with the Milton model would be the opposite. We'd be saying what they're thinking. And as you're sitting in that chair sinking down, you're thinking, where am I going to go with all this now? And we're throwing all kinds of deletion, distortion, and generalization at the person, causing them to go inside and create a hypnotic trance, which is why Erickson was conversational. He's doing all these meta-model distortions, creating the violations, creating the Milton model instead. So whereas the meta-model keeps you out of trance, the Milton model puts you in trance by forcing you to go or guiding you to go inside and make sense of what the person's saying.
Makes perfect sense. So those two are ones we've talked about before on this podcast, meta model and Milton model. And
which now we get to the metaphor model. So they all start with M, and I'm setting up an equilateral triangle way of understanding this that you and I have talked about, Chris, and this will be in a future video or something of that nature. The metaphor model comes from clean language, which is something I've only gotten into in the last few weeks. Clean language comes from the work of David Grove, and I'm not going to tip too much about it here because, well, you'll hear why in a minute. Clean language, basically, David Grove, New Zealand psychologist, he modeled a lot of therapists, and he found a lot of the time hypnotherapists, psychotherapists, whatever, were imposing their own metaphors and their own understandings and their own models of the world on their client or subject. So if the client says, I'm just stuck, I feel stuck in life, a typical therapist might say something like, have you got the resources to get unstuck? You know, what are you going to do to get moving again? Or, you know, how long have you been stuck and what is the next step? Like this kind of thing, which is fairly typical for NLP people and hypnotists to do. What clean language does is ask a series of questions. Grove identified, I believe, 12 of them. And the idea is instead of bringing our own model, our own understanding, we use language that is as clean as possible from our presuppositions, our metaphors. So instead, the person says, I just feel stuck all the time. A clean question would be, and what kind of stuck is stuck?
And the reason this is important is because stuck is a metaphor. The person isn't physically stuck. If I say, oh, I'm stuck, I don't know what to do in business, I'm not actually glued to the ground.
Right, you're not chained to your chair. Yeah.
It's a metaphor. And as you taught me when you read the book Clean Language, there are so many metaphors built into everyday language.
Absolutely, Chris. In fact, you just said built in. We don't build them.
Built in is a metaphor. There we go. It's Grove not actually built.
Grove said we do an average of 6 metaphors a minute, which is amazing. They can be spatial, they can be temporal or time-based, they can be physical. But the amazing thing about clean language, and I'm sharing this with our listeners because I'm really excited about this. This has got me more excited about anything I've studied, more than about anything I've studied in about the last 2 or 3 years. I find it really interesting and a useful way in communication with children, with adults, in therapy, in sales, whatever, to leave our own metaphors and our own models out. So say the person says, you know, I just feel stuck. And you say, and what kind of stuck is that stuck? The person will start to spontaneously go into a trance as you watch them. Their eyes will glaze over, they'll stare, and they'll come back with something else. They'll say, it's like I'm in sand up to my waist and can't move. They've now given you a metaphor. And you say, and is there anything else about sand? They'll say something else. And they will start to unpack this metaphor. And the few times I've used this, I've been blown away to watch people unpack a metaphor. They'll be gesturing in space as to where it is in front of them or beside them or in their head. You point at the metaphor instead of pointing at them when you talk. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, when the metaphor changes, just like in mindscaping, their experience of the world and their behavior changes too. It is startling. So we have 3 different models: meta model, Milton model, and metaphor model, which is clean language. And I'm saying all this to prompt our audience to look into it, because Chris and I have been talking to Judy Reese, who's probably one of the foremost, if not the foremost, trainers of clean language in the world today. And she and I have had a phone conversation. I bought her book. I bought her amazing flashcards. And if you're a therapist, if you're a hypnotherapist, if you're a trainer, if you're a communicator of any kind, you need to learn about this. It is astounding. And you never get stuck. You'll never be wondering what to say. You just go through the material, learn the questions and how to use them, and you will unpack other people's models of the world in ways that are startling. And as Chris will verify, we are now looking to bring Judy Reese onto the next podcast to talk about clean language.
Right. And since we're recording this in December 2016, it looks like this is the last podcast of 2016. So it'll be sometime in early 2017, and it'll be fun.
The last one, Chris. So what are you going to be doing next year? What are you going to do that's going to be different? What are you going to change in your life?
Oh, actually, this is a really good, it's an empowering question for the audience, but I want to tell you, Mike, and the audience, well, you already know this, but let's talk about it with the audience here. I made a change in the last 2 weeks in my life that I'm thrilled about. I'm loving the change. And here's what happened. I, for the last couple of years, have had a personal goal of listening to the advice that you've given, which is build up your schema. Do the things that are important to you in terms of developing as a person, becoming a better communicator, learning more, wide variety of skills, and just have a wider knowledge base, and more greatcourses.com, all of these things that I've wanted to do. And you know what I was doing, Mike? And by the way, that includes physical fitness, all that stuff. Here's how I was organizing my day. I would wake up, get the kids off to school, and then start working on our business, Mike Mandel, Hypnosis.com, all that stuff. Knowing that I would plan my afternoons to be more full of self-development or schema building or non-businessy things. And you know what would happen is I would get caught up in things that were not so important in the morning as part of the business, and I would be doing non-essential business tasks in the morning, and that would leave me with less time in the afternoon to do the stuff that I wanted to do for personal development, because I would feel that I still needed to get the critical business things done. In other words, I was wasting time, right? Mm-hmm. And so, as you know, last Monday, I changed my schedule and decided... Somehow it just hit me. I thought, well, why don't I not work until the afternoon at all on the business? And I'll spend my mornings reading, exercising, studying whatever material I feel like studying, doing things that are for me, that are for the long-term development of myself and my relationships and all that stuff. Nice, yeah. And then starting at noon or about noon, work on our business and work through till when the kids come home from school. And guess what happens? Well, I get all the wonderful stuff that I want to do. So, as an example, I'm reading Clean Language, the book from Judy Reese right now. And I'm reading it in the morning. I'm doing my workout in the morning. And then when I start doing the business stuff, Parkinson's Law kicks in. This is something I learned from Tim Ferriss in his book, The 4-Hour Workweek, back in, I think, 2007, that a task will expand to fill the time that you allot to it. So if you allot less time, it works in reverse. You'll do the task in less time, generally speaking. There's obviously limits on this. But if you don't give yourself as much time, you tend not to waste as much time and therefore focus on the critical stuff and get it done. So my mornings are now my me time, or my wife and I will go for our walks or whatever it is, lunch dates, etc. And then my afternoons are work. And life is way better, more relaxing, and I'm still getting all the important stuff done.
Oh, that's great, Chris. And I didn't know it was called Parkinson's Law, but I'm well familiar with that. It's if I give myself 3 days to do something, guess what? It's going to take 3 days.
I hope it's Parkinson's. I hope I'm not giving the wrong name to it. I'm pretty sure it's called Parkinson's Law.
Yeah, the law where your hand starts to shake when you don't get things done. My dad had a whole book of those, and I wish I had them now. One of them was something like Hodge's Law. Hodge's Law of Selective Gravity. You know this one?
I do not know it. Selective gravity?
Yeah. The chance... statistically, of a piece of buttered toast landing butter side down is directly proportional to the cost of the carpet.
That's hilarious.
Well, listen, why don't you give us an empowering question based on what you just said? I want to hear you generate one.
So here's the empowering question for you based on what we were just talking about. What will you do today to reorder the tasks in your life to put the important stuff up front? What will you do today to reorder your life to put the important stuff up front?
Excellent, Chris. Thanks for that empowering question. It's a good one. And now the Gus Grissom Update, which is sponsored by the Shizjig Corporation. The Shizjig Corporation is located in New York City and is the world's premier provider of ant-proof casters.
Virgil Grissom has been spotted in New York City. Audrey Dufresne writes, "My husband and I, along with our 5-year-old son Marcus, were in Manhattan last weekend on vacation from our home in San Diego. We decided to do some final Christmas shopping and wound up at the toy department at Bloomingdale's. Marcus was looking a lot at Star Wars items and other rocket ship toys, and then we turned the corner and encountered a long line of children waiting to see Santa. Marcus was very excited about this, so we spent the 10 minutes in line talking about Christmas and reindeer and the presents he wanted. I had previously gone online and checked the certificate to ensure that this would not be a Fertaging shopping mall Santa, and thankfully all was in order. But when Marcus got to the front of the line, a pair of Bloomingdale elves ushered him up the few steps to sit on Santa's lap. I vaguely recall thinking it was odd that the female elves were wearing jumpsuits bearing the NASA logo. Suddenly, our son reached up and grabbed Santa's beard, pulling both it and the Santa wig hat combination off his head. To my shock, the Santa was Gus Grissom." Audrey Dufresne went on to say Grissom quickly pulled the disguise back on and then slipped out through the back of the Santa hut, proclaiming, "The show's over, kids." It was definitely Virgil Grissom. There was no mistaking that brush cut. Mrs. Dufresne reported that she would love to have spoken with Grissom, but he quickly ducked out of sight. She said that Grissom was apparently in good health and looked very fit, although he seemed a little tired.
Unbelievable, Chris. It's just astounding how much this man is traveling around. I'm not surprised he seems tired. We really need to know what the heck is going on here. Please send your Gus Grissom sightings to gusgrissom@mailinator.com, and we will put them on the air. And now, Chris, I think it's time for our empowering metaphor. Have you ever heard the story, with all the metaphors I've told you over the years, of Christmas and mechanical hockey game?
I don't think I have.
All right. It's a good one. So here we go. When we moved to Scarborough, which is a suburb of Toronto, for those of you outside the city, from the city of Toronto itself, I was 10 years old and in grade 6. And I moved to a brand new school. It's always a frightening experience. But fortunately, I got a brand new friend. And this was Brian McDowell. And I was 4'6" tall. No exaggeration. I was 65 pounds in grade 8. I still knew him then. And Brian was 6'4". So I was 4'6". He was 6'4". I mean, it was just hilarious. And he always used to get annoyed because he said whenever we walked past a group of tough kids at a plaza, he said I was always the one who would walk ahead of him to show I was the leader, which he found immensely irritating. Anyway, so Brian McDowell became my friend. We were friends for a couple of years, and we're actually reconnected. He's my oldest friend. I've known him more than 50 years now. But one Christmas, we wanted something just amazing, and we couldn't both get it for Christmas. He came from a large family, and his parents couldn't afford it. But my parents agreed to buy me this beautiful mechanical hockey game. And I could probably figure out the year this all happened, because it was the year the National Hockey League, the NHL, switched from 6 original teams. They expanded it by 6 to 12 teams, bringing in Minnesota, St. Louis, and Los Angeles, and so on. So there were 6 expansion teams, 6 original. And to commemorate this, a toy company had created a tabletop mechanical hockey game with the rods and everything you move, and I'm sure you probably had one.
Yeah.
And all 12 teams came with it. And we had this dream that somebody would have the 6 expansion teams, somebody would have the 6 originals, and we would run a complete tournament and just spend hours after school, night after night, playing games and playoffs and having a blast. So Brian really wanted me to get this. I really wanted to get it. But as so often happens in these cases, Chris, I couldn't wait until Christmas. And my mother was working at a women's clothing store up the road, maybe a 15-minute walk. And one day Brian came over after school, and we did a search to see if my parents had bought the hockey game. And we found it. It was in my mom and dad's closet in the back of our apartment, hidden behind some clothes, in a box, stapled together. And unable to wait, I took a screwdriver and carefully pried the staples out. And we pulled all the pieces out, took out all the teams, and we set up the board and snapped all the men on it, put the stand, the legs underneath it, and began to play a game of this. And we'd even put the batteries in so the goals would show up with the red light. We're having a blast, sitting on the floor of my bedroom. Hockey, she scores, and we passes back center. Just amazing. Until we heard the front door open.
Uh-oh.
And my mom came home early from work. Brian looked at me. I've never seen a person turn so ashen white. He just said to me, "We're dead. We are dead." And I said, "Pull yourself together. We're going to get through this." I yelled, "Don't come in, Mom. We're wrapping your Christmas present." And she went, "Okay." So we frantically, quietly put this back in the box, put it on end, push the staples back in, and everything slides to the one end with a crash, which she somehow did not hear. And I went and occupied her in the kitchen while Brian, 10 feet away, sneaks out of the room, down the hall, into my parents' bedroom, where there's no place being, stashes it again. And we were never, ever caught. And we still talk about it to this day. And that was the only time I ever unwrapped Christmas presents before Christmas.
Wow. All right. Thanks, everybody. That was Brain Software, episode 78 with Mike Mandel, and I'm Chris Thompson. We want to remind you to check out MikeMandelHypnosis.com/class for the May Architecture of Hypnosis that runs May 8th through 12th in Toronto, MikeMandelHypnosis.com/class. And the week before that, April 29th and 30th, we have Carl with a K, Carl Smith, coming to Toronto. MikeMandelHypnosis.com/Carl. Again, Carl with a K. That one is already about half sold out, and that is his amazing kinetic shift method he is teaching in Toronto, April 29th and 30th. Be there. We're going to be there. We're going to be taking the class with you. Isn't that right, Mike?
Yes, and April 29th is my birthday, so we'll be heading out with Carl that night and having an absolute blast. I see Yamato in the mix.
Excellent, excellent. All right. Thanks, everybody. And
thanks for tuning in. Good night! Mr. Thompson, I haven't seen you in a while. I've ever told you the rather unusual story of Dennis Bryce Morgan and the language Brilly.
No, tell me about it.
Well, it was towards the end of the war. We were having some rest and relaxation in London, and we'd all gone to our club, Blades, had some drinks. And I remember a number of us was there. Dennis Bryce Morgan, of course. Peter Fitzwadsworth Smythe wasn't there that night, but Guy Bellingham was there, Ray Houston. I think the three Johnnies were there too. Johnny Portman, Johnny Layfim Woe, and Johnny Brookman Dignity Larciar. We went for a walk. There was a bit of a drizzle. And Bryce Morgan said, let's head across London Bridge. And we started walking across the bridge. And there was a bit of a disturbance in the middle. And there was a London bobby in an argument with some chap and speaking gibberish. And we all wandered over to see if the bobby needed any help. And it was this sort of foreign man with a bag full of scrap metal. And he was smiling and talking to the bobby. And he was going, blunga, lunga, dooga, lunga. I have a clue what he was saying. And Bryce Morgan said, my goodness, he said, he's speaking Brilly. I said, Brilly? Wait, what's Brilly? He said, oh, it's a very obscure dialect of Hindi. It's spoken only by the Spangler iron merchants of the Indus River Valley. Less than 600 people in the world can speak it. I said, good heavens, Bryce Morgan, how can you possibly know that? He said, right, here, let me speak to the chap. And he went over and he gave him a Maganga Bumbarambaram thing. And the chap lit up and all grinning at him. And he came over to me and he opened the sack and he took out a horseshoe and held it out to me. And I said, well, what's he doing? Bryce Morgan said, oh, he wants to sell you a horseshoe. I said, I don't want to buy any of his bloody iron. What's he doing that for? And Morgan said something else, and the chap answered him, and he said, I told him that you want to marry him. I was furious with this. I said, this is just outrageous. Anyway, we wandered away, and I said, Morgan, how is it possible you can speak Brilly? He said, well, I can't really. I said, I just saw you do it. He said, no, I can't speak it at all. He said, I just pretended to really well. The chap thought he couldn't understand me, and he didn't want to seem stupid by not understanding his own damn language, so he just followed along with me. I said, well, that's unbelievable. What other languages can't you speak? He said, I can't speak any of them, but I can pretend to speak all of them. He said, the key is just pretend you can and pretend you understand what the other chap's doing, and chances are extremely good he won't want to seem stupid, and he'll speak back to you. I was amazed. I went over to the man and I said, Barunga Dangalubadi. And he handed me a horseshoe and tried to sell me some more bloody iron. Well, I threw it in the Thames and we wandered away. But this is the most remarkable evening. I remember just Leif Himniot's Woe and Johnny Brookman Ding Tilasio laughed all the way back into Bryce Morgan. Just most clever chap.